The wind lashed against the towering glass windows of Vance's global headquarters, but nothing could break the ice around Alexander Vance's heart. A self-made billionaire, cold and calculated, he hadn't smiled in 5 years, not since he lost his entire family in a plane crash. Across town, in a tiny classroom filled with laughter, 32-year-old Emily Monroe, a childless kindergarten teacher, tucked a drawing into her bag, one drawn by a student she loved like her own, until he moved away. 2 broken souls, 2 opposite lives, until one shocking proposal tied their fate forever. "I need a wife, and you need a child." She stared at him, breath stolen. What are you saying? A deal, just for 1 year. But what started as a deal was about to change everything they knew about love, loss, and family. Chapter 1. The Cold Proposal. The snow fell in perfect silence over Manhattan, blanketing the city in soft white. But in the Vance Tower penthouse office, the silence was tense, sharp, like the man who owned it. Alexander Vance stood tall, suit immaculate, gaze hard as granite. At 38, he was the youngest billionaire in New York, head of a global tech empire. But his heart was a desert, barren, lifeless since the crash that took his parents, sister, and newborn niece 5 years ago. Since then, love had become a weakness he couldn't afford. "Cancel the charity gala," he said into his Bluetooth headset. "And no more blind dates. I'm not interested in small talk, dancing, or pretending." His assistant, Julia, sighed softly on the other end. "Sir, the board thinks your image needs softening." "I'm not here to play soft," he muttered. But fate had other plans. That same evening, across town in a public school classroom with peeling paint and too many broken chairs, Emily Monroe sat alone. She wasn't grading papers. She was staring at a tiny paper heart cut from construction paper. On it, written in crayon, "Ms. Monroe, you're the best mom I never had." Her favorite student, Noah, had moved away the day before. No one knew how much that hurt her. At 32, Emily had no husband, no child, and barely any family. Her world was her students. And now, even they were leaving. She blinked away tears and tucked the note in her purse. That night, their worlds collided in a way no one could have imagined. The next morning, Emily arrived at a private school she could never afford for a part-time tutoring job. She was desperate for extra income after her school lost funding. She didn't know who the client was. She didn't know it was Alexander Vance. He stepped into the sleek library, wearing a tailored charcoal suit and carrying a silver laptop. Cold, distant, impossibly handsome. "You're Emily Monroe?" he asked, voice like ice. "Yes, you must be, Mr. Vance." He studied her for a long beat. "You're good with children," he said flatly. I try to be," she replied, uncertain. "I need a wife," he said suddenly, without emotion. "You need a child. So here's a deal. Marry me for a year. I'll give you a future, and you give me the appearance of family." Emily's jaw dropped. "Are you out of your mind?" "No, I'm just done wasting time." Chapter 2. 1 year, 1 condition. Emily paced the marble floor of his penthouse, struggling to keep her balance, emotionally and physically. The proposal had shaken her to her core. She couldn't believe it. He had barely spoken to her for 10 minutes, and now he wanted marriage? "You think I'm going to marry you like some contract bride?" she asked. "Yes," he said simply, "because I'm offering you security, travel, a future, and, if you want, a child, whether through adoption or fertility clinics. I have the means." She froze. "Why me?" "Because you don't want me for my money. You care about children. You're not fake. And you look like someone I once knew." Her voice softened. "Who?" He looked away. "My sister." Silence filled the air like fog. Pain hung between them, heavy and unspoken. "Emily, finally Saturday, why do you want a fake family?" He took a breath, slow and deliberate. "Because my investors are threatening to pull out unless I settle down and humanize my image. I need to prove I'm not broken. But I don't want real love. That ended for me a long time ago." His words were a razor across her heart. "You're asking me to pretend for a year? For show?" she said. He nodded. "You'll have your own room, your own space. It's a business arrangement. No expectations." She swallowed hard. "What happens after the year?" "You walk away with financial independence. And if you want to adopt, I'll make sure you get every legal resource possible." The tears came slowly. She didn't wipe them away. "I've dreamed of being a mother," she whispered. But not like this. I can't offer you love, he said. But I can give you purpose, safety, and a child, if that's what you truly want. For a long moment, she stared at him. Cold, brilliant, powerful, and deeply broken. She thought about her empty apartment, her lost students, her lonely nights. And then, quietly, she nodded. Okay, 1 year. His eyes flickered, not with joy, but with relief. Then we start Monday. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Emily sat on the velvet couch in the Vance penthouse, watching Alexander pour orange juice into a small ceramic cup with shaking hands. Careful, she said gently, reaching out. You're going to spill it. He grunted and set the cup on the breakfast tray like it was a bomb. Kids are delicate. Emily smiled. They're not porcelain. They're just little people. Across from them sat 6-year-old Rosie, a foster child temporarily in their care while adoption paperwork moved through the courts. The little girl had bright eyes, wild curls, and an ability to ask 100 questions per minute. Alexander had no idea what to do with her. She reached for the juice and looked up at him. Are you my dad now? The question froze the air in the room. Emily waited. Alexander cleared his throat. Not yet, but someday. Rosie asked. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Emily knelt down beside the girl. For now, you can call us whatever makes you feel safe, okay? Rosie beamed. Okay, I'll call you Miss M, and I'll call him Mr. Serious. That made Emily burst into laughter. Alexander didn't, but a corner of his lip tugged, just barely. Later that evening, as Rosie slept curled beside a stuffed elephant, Emily stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself. Snow drifted like feathers against the city skyline. She didn't hear Alexander walk up behind her. She's not scared of you, she said. She should be, he muttered. She sees who you are under the suits in silence. Emily said softly. You want to protect someone again. You just don't know how. He looked at her then, eyes searching. What if I fail her? You won't. Because this time, you're not alone. They stood in silence. And for the first time, something unfamiliar flickered in his eyes. Something like hope. Spring arrived early that year, painting Central Park in pink blossoms and golden light. Emily took Rosie to a private garden hidden behind the Vance estate, a place overgrown with ivy and silence. No one had touched it in years. This place used to be my sister's, Alexander told her one morning, standing on the garden stone path. She used to plant daffodils here. Emily knelt beside Rosie, planting new flowers with small, dirt-covered hands. Let's bring it back to life. Every day, they worked in that garden, digging, watering, laughing. It was the only place Alexander seemed to breathe easier. Rosie would run between flower beds, holding worms like treasures. Emily would hum lullabies while pruning roses. One afternoon, Emily found Alexander sitting on a bench beneath the cherry tree, eyes closed, face tilted toward the sun. You look human like this, she teased. I used to be, he said, not opening his eyes. She sat beside him. You still are. Then came the silence, the kind that felt like a bridge between strangers who were no longer strangers. He opened his eyes and looked at her, not just looked, but saw her. Not as an employee, not as a caretaker, but as a woman who'd given him a reason to try again. You're not what I expected, he said. Neither are you. He reached out suddenly and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. She didn't move. But then, like a wave crashing into stone, he pulled his hand back. The wall slammed back up. This was never part of the deal, he said, standing abruptly. And just like that, he was gone. Emily sat on the bench, heart pounding, eyes stinging. She whispered to the wind. It was never a deal for me. The silence between them grew heavier with each passing day. Alexander threw himself back into work. The board was happy. He appeared settled, presentable, even fatherly. Publicity shots with Rosie in the park, donation announcements, charity appearances with Emily on his arm. From the outside, they looked like the perfect family. But inside the walls of their penthouse, a cold war had begun. Emily avoided his eyes. She spent most of her time with Rosie, braiding her hair, reading bedtime stories, dancing to silly songs in the living room. Alexander watched them from a distance. Always from a distance. One night, Emily found herself alone on the balcony, staring out at the sparkling skyline. Her heart ached. She had agreed to a deal, but somewhere along the way, she'd fallen out of it. She hadn't expected to care so much for Rosie, for the man hiding behind all that armor. She didn't hear him come out.